Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frankar. We're back at our normal routine of being here on a Tuesday morning because there's no breaking news. There's nothing imminent that we have to go to. So we're here to talk to you about what's coming up. And, of course, the thing that happened, I believe it was this morning or yesterday, is Penn State football officially announced the spring calendar, their schedule for the upcoming week. So, of course, as soon as that happens, we're going to give you our first look, our primer, our preview of that coming up on the show today. But, of course, the pleasantries. Like, I am not a person who starts a conversation without a good hello. I want to check in on my guys. Nate Bauer, Sean Fitz are here to discuss your questions, your comments on the show, of course, featuring the mailbag later in the show, but also throughout the show as well. We're going to be sprinkling in your comments and questions. But, Nate, welcome. What the hell's wrong with the basketball team?
Oh, wow. I was going to start by talking about how cold it is.
Yeah, but it's been cold for 2 months now. Like, we've actually had a real winter for the first time in a long time, and like I'm over it. Like, it's just
You know what else has been cold for 2 months?
Oh, do it.
Penn State basketball. Oh,
He did it.
We sound like a morning drive time radio show right now.
Well, I don't know if you know where I came from before this, but I got some news for you. Fitz, I don't know if it's that you don't have your glasses on, but you seem even less amused by my nonsense than usual. Welcome to the show.
I'm just waiting for like random fart noises or something to come out of your sound machine. Don't do it.
One thing I will not do. The air horn is that drives me up the wall because that.
All right.
Yeah, I hate that so much.
Good to know. No, actually, I just walked my dogs and I came back inside. My glasses fogged right up, so I put them on the table and forgot to grab them before I came in here. So yes, it is a product of the cold, but it's also a product of living in central Pennsylvania. We talk about how challenging recruiting can be. Yeah, excuse me. That's all part of the job. But yeah, Penn State basketball not good. Like not pleasant to watch either. Like I'm sorry, it's just
catching strays.
It's not. Hey, Penn State hockey's on fire. Wrestling,
that's true.
You know, doing what they do. Like I think I saw they won by 20. It's like a big letdown or something like that. But yeah, they're awesome. Baseball 2-1 over the weekend. Really, really good start for baseball. But yeah, Penn State basketball not carrying the Director's Cup points total anywhere closer than it needs to be. So that's all on you, Nate. Sorry.
Yeah. It's not my fault. I didn't do it.
Well, let's move on to some happier news for Penn State football fans, which is now we know when things are happening. Everyone feels better once we get a good schedule. Of course, Greg Pickle put this out earlier this week. This is the Penn State football schedule. It starts on March 25th, goes all the way to Saturday, April 26th, which, of course, we knew the blue-white game was at that date already. Fitz, how much later is this than normal? Is this a week, 2 weeks later than normal? And just generally, can you set up how the end of the season has affected this part of the calendar?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the end of the season had anything to do with it because this April 26th was set. I believe was that the Maryland game that came out. It was late in the season. I don't think it was the SMU playoff game, but it was late in the season. Okay. And I think it's kind of built into it a little bit, but also the calendar shapes up that way. Spring break is not later this year, but it's a little bit later this year. I believe it starts the 8th is the Saturday that it starts. So usually what they do is they come back and they get back into it the week after spring break, but you've got a little bit of extra cushion. Easter always plays into the scheduling. So you got a little bit of extra cushion. So that was put out there yesterday. Ryan Snyder, by the way, put that out there. Just a quick correction. But yeah, you get more time to get those practices in. Nate's talked about it before. Spring ball is, I don't want to say it's on its way out, but I think it's a harboring change is what's happening with spring ball right now. So yeah, you got to get those guys a little bit more time. And I mean, when you get to the end of April, what happens? Like there's no reward for having your spring game. I guess you get out on the road a little bit earlier, but there's no reward for having your spring game the second week of April versus the last week in April. And we know as we open the show talking about weather, it's central Pennsylvania, so it's going to be unpredictable either way.
I don't mind it being a little bit later, right? I don't mind that start of spring football being at the end of March instead of in the beginning or the middle. Nate, modifying spring ball in general, what does Fitz mean by that?
Broadly speaking, or this year?
Broadly speaking, let's start. That's where I think you do your best work, is broadly speaking.
No, I mean, I think that it's something that is, it's a balancing act, because, and I think that James Franklin understands and the program understands and are treating it this way, that on one hand, it is an opportunity for young guys to represent themselves, right? Transfers, what have you, guys who have not proven themselves, to give them that opportunity, that window to, right, kind of a sneak preview of what's to come in preseason camp. And to be honest with you, that sneak preview also gives the coaching staff a good 3-month lead in to preseason camp with an idea of who they can count on, who they, are left wondering about. So I do think that there is certainly value there, but on the other hand of it, and especially to the guys that, it's just funny talking about this as a real thing. The big money guys, who don't have anything to prove, they don't want to do it. There's limited value for them. There are injury hazards for them that are just, you want to avoid if you can. And so that's the balancing act. And I think one that Penn State intends to be. Look, like, the word with James Franklin is strategic, and it's about everything. But I think that spring practice is certainly one of those areas that, at Penn State specifically, and then even nationally, you're just seeing a push away from the intensity, right? The commitment. I'm not sure. Like, just being all in on it is
more of an NFL mini camp after the draft, right? Fitz, more in that model of, we're doing drills, you're doing positional work, but like full pad scrimmages, block and tackle, all that stuff is de-emphasized after, a long season.
Yeah, you want to stay healthy, you want to stay fresh, and you want to. I mean, you're going to go 0-0 in the spring. Like, that's you're not going to win any games, you're not going to lose any games. But you can do things that set you up for losses in the fall by getting your players injured. So there's that. I think it's that double-edged sword that we always talk about, because the young guys need to establish themselves, get those reps. I mean, you think about running back, like you think about Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. What do they have to accomplish this spring? Not much, but there's 4 other scholarship running backs that have a lot at stake, because you got a new running backs coach. It's a fresh start for everybody, but it's also an audition for them, because Cam Wallace was the number 3 under Jaywan Sider. Is Cam Wallace the number 3 under Stan Drayton? I don't know. So, and there's a ton of talent in that room too. So it's very, very interesting to me at positions like that. And by the way, they got to install a new defense. So that kind of, you need reps at some point there.
Yeah, there is a balance that we've been talking about of making sure you're getting better and also not doing things that after a long season. This is part I'm curious about is, Nate, you talked about the young guys that need to get that work and need to develop as football players. When you go as long as Penn State did, veteran players, you're trying to get those guys ready for a game. And there's a tangential benefit to everyone practicing longer and longer and longer. But it is different than spring football. Like, you're preparing to win a game in the college football playoff. So that development, how much of an advantage is it for Penn State, and how much do they need to de-emphasize spring football because they're in the playoff? And then if you don't make the playoff, how much more of an advantage is that in program development? We talk about money and all that stuff aside, just generally playing football longer feels like an advantage for players at this particular level.
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually one that I asked Mike Rhodes the other day. Was because, and bear with me here, but basketball has these young guys who, through the course of the season, are needing to, through circumstances, are needing to be relied upon more. And the question is, how much of your time is spent developing those guys versus preparing for the opponent, right? If you're running scout team effectively, are you getting better? Are you individually getting better? And his answer was adamantly yes, right? Like, player development is a constant throughout the calendar, but even during the season, it's something that you can hone in on and make guys better. So I do think that there's that translates to football. There are right? All of those individual drills that we're there for, those individual periods, I should say, that the media is invited to check out during practices. Like everybody gets to do that, right? It's not just sitting off to the side and watching the main guys take reps. So I do think that the season being as prolonged as it was, all of those extra practices, I don't know. It would be interesting to find out how many additional actual practices, right? Understanding that they had a maintained game week for the Big Ten championship game, first round of the playoff, second round of the playoff, and then the semifinal round, at 5 practices a week, that's 20, right? Yeah. As opposed to a normal bowl prep, which is 15, right? Modified. So yeah, I do think there is some value there.
This question, I want to get to this. It ties in really well into this particular part of the conversation. So we're going to dip in the mailbag right now. And this is kind of where we started from that young player perspective of its development time. So Fitz, this is from Poncho 570. Who's your pick for having their eureka moment this spring? And translating from Poncho, who does the light come on for in this particular situation? Now, it's very wide open here. I'll leave it for you if you want to answer this in whatever way you want, or I can zero it in a little more on need and fit if you desire.
Let's go with I don't have one that comes to mind right away. So okay. I'm.
What do you think? Who is the most important player or position for Penn State to get a young player to develop? Where do you think it's most important that progress happens for the betterment of 2025 in the fall?
I mean, I think receiver is the obvious case here. You say young player, but you also think about a guy like Devontae Ross and like those guys that are new to the program that obviously are so important to what Penn State's trying to do as an offense this year, to spread it out, to take the pressure off those running backs. So that guy, and then Tyseer Denmark, of course, redshirt freshman wide receiver. When you ask about young guys developing, they got to flip that room somehow. Like you're not going to go out and sign a free agent, top of the money chain free agent. Even though, there's an argument that they will still look for a guy in the spring. But you need something from that position, and you feel pretty confident about across the board. Even, with Tyler Warren moving out, you feel that Khalil Dinkins is a really good football player. Luke Reynolds just wrote about Andrew Olish yesterday on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So you feel good about tight end. You feel good about running back. Just goes back to the same old stuff, right? You got to feel that the receiver needs to make the strides. And yes, you do need Drew Aller to make strides, but I don't think that it comes in the spring, if that makes any sense, because you look at what they're trying to do. A lot of his stuff is, I would say, coverage based, and how do you work in the game time situations? It's tough to do, very, very tough to do in the spring. So those guys are receiver, just stand out above everyone else. And that's not breaking news. That's not unique insight. It's just, they got to get it done.
Today's question is brought to you by beating a dead horse. Of course, that is the correct answer. There's no way around it. So that's
yeah.
I mean, it is what it is, right?
I was not really prepared for that, if you couldn't tell. Defensively, it's the same thing with linebacker. Like you got to figure out who's going to be. Tony Rojas is in a sling last time we saw him, so who's going to come up and step up? And is it Keon Wiley? Is it one of those young guys? It's tough to project right now, just because there's so many unknowns. And the tough part for some of these guys is replacing such solid production where you knew what you were going to get with Kobe King, with in the secondary, Jalen Reed, and to a lesser extent, KJ Winston, who didn't play last year. So Dejon Lane's in that mix, a couple of corners in that mix. So Davian Collins is in that mix. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys that potentially can make that happen. It's just a matter of stepping up and doing it. And we're over a month out from spring ball. So it's going to have time to sort of marinate over the next couple of weeks in winter workouts. And because those winter workouts are arguably as useful and as vital for these guys to get where they need to go. I mean, how many guys have we taken a look at this off season and said, hey, this next couple of months is going to be huge for them? And that's not just because there's a football out on the field. It's with Chuck Losley with that strength staff.
Yeah. I've been trying. Sorry, Nate, you got something. Go ahead.
No, I was going to curveball you guys just a minute and go with an old guy that has eureka potential. You know where I'm going. Zariah Fisher.
I think so.
Zariah Fisher. Right. Who's already had the eureka moment, just hasn't had the opportunity to put it on the field because, of his injury circumstances. But I do think at a position that needs it, there's an opportunity there for him to, once back healthy and then having that lead in, right? I do think it's to his, well, obviously it's to his benefit that his injury didn't happen in August, right? He got hurt in April last year. So to have that run up, I do think gives him an opportunity to actually put everything that he's done, everything he's put into the program on the field and be a productive member of that defensive line room next year.
Today's show and all of our Monday shows are brought to you by our friends down in State College at Anti-Fragile Brewing Company. We're going to be hanging out there at some point and having a meet and greet and a hangout. We'll let you know when that happens. Nate, why are we choosing Anti-Fragile, and why do you like it so much?
Beer.
Very good. Very good beer too.
Yeah, no, they have beer, and we like beer, and it's the best beer in State College. And the people there that serve it are the best people that serve it in State College. You name it, it's all the best. I love superlatives, and they live up to that in every way. Obviously, as you can see for people watching on YouTube, the footage there, they have a great selection and variety of beers. They are constantly changing and rotating out. Your favorite beer might not be there the next time, but guess what? A new favorite beer will be. And because of that, it keeps things interesting. It keeps it always a place that you want to seek out. And so I do think that over the last year, it has been supremely beneficial to us and hopefully to them that we've had this partnership and have unlocked a little bit of the hidden side of State College in terms of places that adults, who like sports and like some of the finer things in life.
This is not a State Patty's Day hangout, Fitz, right? Like, so I know that we're coming up on that soon. This isn't a place where you're going to go that weekend. This is a place where if you like to enjoy the nicer things in life and quality and not quantity, which of course, like a certain level of that as well, all of this, but that's where you want to go to get a good cheesesteak and to enjoy a good beer in a good atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a great place to meet people in terms of you can have conversations there and you can actually hear the other person. I think it's really a underrated aspect of some places in State College. So yeah, it's a great little hangout for Nate and I, just, of a certain age. It makes a lot of sense.
We're so old.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, you live.
You can find a seat. There's going to be a seat there for you. You can sit.
It is invaluable, especially if you're married. Like that's a big time thing. It's just like you walk in there and there's two seats there. It's like, that's a great little date night. So no, we appreciate Anti-Fragile. We appreciate their beer. We appreciate their people, probably more so than anything. And definitely check them out if you're in State College for a weekend. Hey, and if it's for a basketball game, maybe that's where you need to be. Is at a brewery.
Yeah, make sure you go there before the game and you enjoy an aspect of your night that does not involve the winning and losing of a team, more of the enjoying State College and what we offer. But by the way, if you come into town for any reason whatsoever, and I know you guys love State College and you want to come into town because you just like the area is great, make sure you check out Anti-Fragile and tell them that we sent you there. That helps all of us out. And speaking of helping us all of us out, we got to get to Fitz's recruiting update to find out who the next batch of helping out Penn State football is going to be in the future. Nate will be back in just a little bit. Of course, we've got plenty of stuff to talk about coming up in just a moment. But Fitz, recruiting, always something churning. And not that, we have a full show for this later in the week. But what are the things that interested you from this weekend in Penn State recruiting?
Yeah, wrote about it this weekend. Interesting, some movement down in Florida. Brian Harris, a defensive lineman from Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, ended up decommitting from Maryland. Why is that significant? He picked up a Penn State offer earlier in the week. He has a bunch of visits that are he's like all over the map. He was committed to Maryland. Brian Williams was the defensive coordinator there. Brian Williams close with the family, so he committed to Maryland early. But a lot of schools have come along since then. You look at his official visit list, and Stanford's on there, and he wants to get up to Penn State. That one's not set yet, but NC State. He's just kind of all over the place. South Carolina. So there's a lot to like, and I'm arguing with myself if I called him Brian Allen or Brian Harris.
No, you nailed it.
Okay, good deal. It's just that stuff replays in my head sometimes, and I just can't get over it. So I appreciate that. But now Stanford's in there, West Virginia's in there, NC State's in there, South Carolina. Not typically the four schools you see lumped together, but that one will come along. He plays edge. He's probably a defensive, like an interior prospect, about 6'4", 290. Yeah, nice player. Like he's got a nice tool set to play with. And you look at what Penn State has done on the defensive line, and kind of fits what they like to do. They found, I mean, he's kind of a body type, sort of similar to a Liam Andrews type, where you can see him growing into. He's listed at 290. He does not look 290, which I'm not sure who did the measurements, but he's got some. If he's 290, he moves about as well as a 290 pounder has. We will see what happens if he makes it to campus. He does expect to make it to campus. He's also got some connections to the Philly area via his father. So you got that going for him. But Penn State continues to take a look at. I would say, I don't want to say load up, but they offered a ton of offensive linemen yesterday. They've offered a bunch of defensive tackles. Carter Gooden up in New England just picked up an offer this weekend. So it's not about guys going elsewhere, but this is the time of year when you're starting to have your meetings and you're starting to figure out that candidate, or that tier of candidates where it's like, okay, maybe we can get official visit for these guys. Maybe we need to sort of reinforce the board more so than anything, because you look at Damari Simeon and Alex Haskell, guys at the top of the board in the interior, but then you've got guys like Harris, guys like Gooden, that sort of, hey, you want as many options as possible, and you don't want to find yourself out in the dust. And if we're honest here, like putting out an offer right now doesn't bind you to anything. Like it's not a situation where you have to take a kid if you make an offer right now. So might as well get your name out there as much as possible. And I think we're seeing that on both lines right now, with Deion Barnes, with Phil Troutwine, and there is where we're going. We're in. Whoops, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is also the time of year where there's been some development, right? Like you're reassessing where players are in terms of like how they've grown and what you've seen from them on film. And it feels like you talk about, like, don't get enamored with the early names, because especially at these kind of positions, development throughout the process is as important as who's big early. Is this a landmark of that? Or is this just kind of, as you said, a resetting or reinforcement of certain things?
Yeah, I mean, you want to see sort of that ascent, and you're seeing with a lot of guys, and you're seeing a lot of guys level off, and really that's what I keep going back to, is this process and this cycle is so long that names are going to peak early, names are going to fall, names are going to pop back up on the radar late. Like there's no right way to go about this, because it's all so random in a sense. So you're seeing guys, like if you look back to the last class, there were guys that ended up in the last class that did not have offers at this point. I'm looking, okay, so for example, we're looking at tight end this year, and tight end, a bit of an outlier because they took 3 last year. It's going to be tough to sign a top line guy because of that. So you got an official visit set up with Max Sutter for June. Max Sutter probably up there at the top. There's a couple of other guys that are in that realm, but Penn State can afford to be choosy because it's tight end. But like, I'm looking at this board and thinking Penn State's tight end in the class of 2026 may not even have an offer yet, because of the way that they discover these guys in the spring. I mean, Luke Reynolds didn't have an offer at this point. He ended up as the number 1 tight end, I think, with us in the class of 2024. So like, when you offer, you can say plan A, plan B, plan C. Stuff really doesn't add up anymore. So I'm very curious how this is going to go with several positions. Now, Penn State's got 9 commitments in the class of 2026. They've started off really well. They've got some spots where they have, there's 3 receivers in this class. So you can afford to be a little bit more choosy. I know Penn State fans just want to take everybody at receiver, because they fix that room, and they absolutely do. I have no argument with that. But you've got the opportunity to sort of feel some things out and get yourself to June at that position. Still want to get better at, everywhere. The offensive line, the defensive line are big points of emphasis right now. But you've got your quarterback in. Running back is very interesting. Cy Mickens is committed. There's no secret he's going to check out his options here. Very tied to Jaywan Sider. I still think Penn State's got a great chance to land a signature, but at the same time, Stan Drayton's going to come in. He's going to have his guys that he's been monitoring, albeit at a different level at Temple, and he's going to get some new eyes on he's got to get some eyes on some new prospects as well. So that's going to be fascinating.
Yeah,
probably add 2 running backs. I say that with the notion that there's a lot of running backs on campus on scholarship right now. But that's a position churn as well. So it's just very interesting all around. And again, the guys that have the offers first don't necessarily mean they're the best prospects. The guys that have the high ratings first don't necessarily mean they're going to be the best players in college. And I think you're seeing a reflection of that in just basically how Penn State's gone about this cycle. And a lot of, like, this is not just a Penn State thing. A lot of schools have discovered hidden gems in February and March.
Yeah, I took a look at Brian Harris's full game film, and he's an interesting football player. So if you want to check out any of that from his advanced scouting, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great time to remind you if you want Fitz's thoughts. He wrote an in-depth article about Andrew Olish, getting everybody to know him a little bit better. Of course, Nate has his articles at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com detailing different aspects, freshmen that we talked to, which we may or may not be getting to here on the show in just a little bit. But all of that right now you can get for $1, and previously we had this conversation that you get $1, then you try it out for a week, and then you sign up for the full year at full price. Well, now it's $1 a week for a year. So you pay $1 a week, and that's it. So if you sign up right now, you get just an unbelievably good deal for a year's worth of access to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, the best Penn State football content there is out there. And I say that being very proud of the work that we do and how hard our guys work to get you all of that, the best content out there. What else happened in recruiting? Are we getting to Jasir Rogers, speaking of the receivers and maybe a little bit underrated in this class?
Yeah, and I want to plug Ryan's Inside Lash from last Friday because it was terrific, breaking down Penn State's top offensive targets that were left off of the big board. The big board was 20 players long, and I think Ryan listed 30 more on the offensive side of the ball or something like that. It is a enormously large board at this point, which is kind of what you expect, especially when you start opening the doors a little bit more nationally, and trying to get those guys in for official visits. And they'll have 55, 60 official visits this summer. And the class is always going to end up at 25, 27, something like that. So there's a lot to like there. Jasir Rogers is very good. As we switch gears, video went up this week. It was expected. Like, I have been very, very high on Jasir Rogers, the highest I've been on a receiver at Penn State probably for a while now. Just his explosiveness, his athleticism. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's 5'11", so 5'10 and a half, 5'11". Goes up and gets the ball and does some amazing things. So always fun to watch the highlights, especially when you've got an athlete like that who's a legit 4.3 kid, just explosive as all get out. It's fun to watch. Jasir Rogers is going to continue to trend up. We have him, T. Frank, you have that handy?
90?
We have him as a 4-star in 231 overall. I think he's just going to keep going up. I'm hesitant to go 5-star because I know what that brings with it. And I know that that's very, very top of the top type stuff. And I would love to see more out of him. I would love to see, it's unfortunate that Delaware is the sort of what everybody comes back to because the competition is not great, but all the numbers are terrific. Somebody just mentioned his reach in the chat. Yes, his reach is very good as well. So he's got all these numbers that make sense for a top 100 kid. Yeah. Some people have mentioned 5 stars. Again, that's such a stretch because I remember Penn State fans wanted Caden Saunders to be a 5-star, and that's not it. I feel much, much better about Jasir Rogers just because of the athletic capabilities that he has. The way that he moves is different than a lot of the guys that he's brought in. So I'm very high on him. And again, if you're referencing 2026 scholarship or recruiting rankings right now, just tap the brakes because updated ones will come soon. And I like Penn State's receiver class. I'm going to say it. It's Jasir Rogers is really good. Jaquaden Guilford, very good as well. LeVar Keys has surprised me with his movement, but with the way that he played his junior season. Very good start. They would like to cap that off with a guy like Messiah Hampton, a guy like Connor Salmon, Travis Johnson down in Virginia, Davion Brown down in Virginia. And then there's some other guys out of the region that are going to pop up on campus either this spring or summer. So the board probably not as distinct and widespread as that offensive line or that defensive line, but you got 3 commitments already, and they're pretty good ones. So I'm encouraged with the way that Marcus Higgins has recruited in 2026. There, I said it. Just have at it.
Yeah, there's always a comment of, what about the receivers coach? And we had the same conversation. I'm not saying that the results are going to be the same, but we had the same conversation about Phil Trautwein, and now everyone is he's everybody's hero from the Penn State recruiting perspective and the Penn State fan perspective, if you've been following along with all of that. So, that's just to say the story now is not how the story is going to end. Fitz, we've got the Thursday recruiting show, and of course, we're going to get into more detail and all that stuff, but do you have anything in mind previewing BlueWhiteIllustrated.com coverage of recruiting this week? Anything you got or Ryan is working on that we can promote here on the show?
I believe Ryan working on the defensive version of that, which is really interesting because there's more defensive targets or there's more defensive space in this class. It's 6-3 right now in terms of offense. So you're going to look at the defensive line, which I think is very intriguing, especially with the talent in the region. Jackson Ford set up a spring visit. He wrote about that this morning. But that edge board is enticing, especially after 2025 when it was all over the map. And Penn State ended up okay, but it's very, very much more well-stocked this year for Deion Barnes to make something happen.
All right. We are going to, of course, cover, as I said, more this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and on the Thursday recruiting show. As always, subscribe, like the video. That helps us immensely with YouTube and all that stuff. Let's get to the mailbag. Okay, so I'm learning from my mistakes. I always want to have a longer conversation about the mailbag questions and kind of get them in, and they always end up being like crammed in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the show. So we're not doing that. We're getting to that right now, and if we have time, we'll get to the Penn State freshman class, something that happened last week. We got to meet those players. But chat, people here live, now's your opportunity. I'm giving you like half the show to come up with some good questions and conversations to have. And it's not going to be like who's the next to commit or, Drew Aller sucks, right? Like that's not helpful. That's not a conversation. That is your opinion. But of course, we can have conversations about all of those things. We have ones from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com from the message board that we put out every day, night before the show to see what our subscribers want to know. This one ties into the show very nicely, and I like this question from DS0927, which feels more like a password than a username, but that's okay. New member at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Always love introducing new members. So they say, outside of implementing and learning a new defense, what are the main goals or points of emphasis for the team this spring? We covered some of this. I want to start with the fact that the offense will take a new shape in 2025 based on the talent on the roster. Andy Kolnicki is serious about every year crafting, if he has to, an entirely new offense based on whose strengths are where and what the offense needs to look like this year. Now, the talent may be similar, right? So Penn State's tight end room is deep, focusing on tight ends and running backs. That probably isn't going to change, but the receiver room looks a hell of a lot different now than it did at this time last year. So his second year here on campus, I expect there to be stuff that iterates, innovates, and that starts now. Like that, those plans, trying to get that stuff installed, seeing what works, what doesn't work, seeing what Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson can do, all that happens in the spring. So I think that's an essential part of the offensive evolution, starts in spring football. Nate, do you have another one of a checklist of important things that happen in spring football?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to be a jerk and say that first one is pretty big. Like implementing I'm just kidding. I'm messing around, but yeah, implementing and learning a new defense, it feels to me is extremely significant to to this team and its personnel. I do think that what you're saying with the offense is I'm not saying it has to be a total reset, but Tyler Warren was so unique and his role was so unique in really all of college football, let alone for Penn State this past season. Like just the numbers bear that out in terms of his targets and receptions, all that stuff. To have your tight end be the focal point of your passing game in every capacity, including explosive plays, is atypical. So, all right, what do things look like? To your point about the transfer receivers, I just being real, I think it also creates a lead up to an evaluation of what more is needed, if something is needed, in terms of last gasp adding somebody through the transfer portal, right? Yeah. I do think solidifying the roster and getting an understanding of where you stand at some of those positions. Look, like they've been burnt on potential, right?
Yeah. Fitz, I think
yeah.
That's a fair point to say that I feel like there is this assessment of Penn State's portal activity that they haven't gone after players in the portal. They haven't gone after receivers. But if you think of it, Malik McClain, Dante Cephas, Mitchell Tinsley, like they've been as aggressive as they can be getting the guys they can get in the portal. And Malik McClain, not for nothing, was a contributor for a playoff team as well. I think, for whatever that's worth, like there was obvious talent there that multiple Power 5 schools have wanted him throughout his career. Like in the NFL vernacular, first round draft picks always get second chances. And talent wise, that's kind of what his talent skill is.
Yeah. When you talk about going out and securing a guy in the portal, part of the thing that we don't talk about, because we think it's all bidding and all money, is that guy's got to be interested. Penn State doesn't have a great reputation right now in terms of getting wide receivers to the league, even though they're just a couple of years removed from having a first round draft pick. So it's just a very interesting dynamic because I don't want to say it all fell apart so quickly, but it seemed to, that's tough to sell. And, you can put a dollar amount on it. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, the guy's got to be interested to come here. And there's a lot more appealing schemes. I don't know about schemes, but there's a lot more appealing bodies of work out there to make it work. And me, it's so fascinating. Someone mentioned in the chat, it's time for Khalil Dinkins to shine. Absolutely, he can shine. He's not getting 200 targets like Tyler Warren got last year. I don't even know his target number off the top of my head, but to catch
it was up there.
Yeah.
It was 150. So
to spread that out is going to be fascinating to see how that plays out, because you've got to find the guys and you've got to discover if you've got an actual option to rebalance that out, because it's not going to happen overnight. So I'm very curious how that target distribution is going to work out. We mentioned earlier the transfers, but also Denmark, and you've got guys coming back like Clifford. So it's fascinating to me, and I don't know how they're going to do it. Like that's probably the craziest part, is because yes, you've got options, but you've also got a body of work that hasn't proven itself there. So.
Well, we're going to go further down this rabbit hole because here it is. Go ahead.
Oh, no, just one more very flippant remark. But James Franklin talks consistently about how, against the rules it is for these guys who already know where they're going before they enter the transfer portal. Penn State needs to do that.
Dispense with the honor routine. Is what you're saying?
You have got to become part of that ecosystem, because you're going to die if you don't. That's just the reality. Is whatever form it takes, right? Guy who knows the mom, right? Whatever, however the back channeling needs to happen, with a number that is over and above. I think there is an element of truth. I'm being a little bit flippant, but I'm just saying. Making something happen where Penn State in the past has been reticent to upend the room, to disrupt the room, right? In terms of the hierarchy, and you don't want to shake things up to the point where other guys get upset. Like they're past that. They're past that. and it is time to dance with the line.
It was spring football last year where we had this conversation. If that happened, they lost their number one receiver, Keandre Lambert-Smith, because of NIL considerations and upsetting at least a player in the room. And now they lost all those players anyway. Like they all transferred after this last season. So it didn't work in the long run. Now, it did work in the short term of the fact that you had Trey Wallace for the 2024 season. But in the long term, you didn't necessarily get what you were expecting. You didn't get the payout in terms of production, I guess, in that sense. So they're still at that particular position.
Well, who's running the show right now, Nate? Like who is making all the moves? And it's no answer for you. It's the agents, right? Like those are the people that are telling these kids to go into the portal because they have offers waiting for them. Whether or not they do depends. But if you've got a legit agent, which your quarterback, who needs to look the best out of anyone, right? This is a contract year for Drew Aller because he could potentially be the number one pick.
Yep.
Okay. Your quarterback's got representation. That guy should be working for Penn State, like to get Drew the best potential weapons that he can get him. So, I mean, that you're talking about Penn State getting into it. Well, I think this entire ecosystem has to work for that to take place.
Oh,
yep.
That's a layer and a level of this that is just like, that's staring into the abyss. There's no end to that, but you're absolutely right. Like where in the corners and the shadows can you gain those advantages? And this is the favorite one of Penn State fans. Brad asks the question about Quentin Martin. If he's not RB3 or 4, could he be used in the slot? And I promised myself the last time we opened the mailbag, I wasn't going to answer this question again. But this is just my concern with that. First off, yes, I think him playing in the slot is a great idea as a running back playing in the slot. So then technically you have 3 running backs on the field or 2 running backs on the field. As a runner who can catch, that is absolutely fine to have packages where he's lined up in the slot and running routes downfield. But if you're asking, is he a receiver? No, fundamentally, he's still a running back because Fitz, I don't feel like it solves the problem. I don't like you need receivers, and receivers win not just in the slot. They've got plenty of slot options. Tysier Denmark, Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson can run routes from the slot. Nate, you've been talking about if Caden Saunders can contribute to this team. You can't line 7 slot receivers up on the field. You need to have people outside. You need to have wide receivers. I don't see Quentin Martin as a wide receiver. They are still lean on guys that can win outside the formation. Quentin Martin, Andrew Olish, that does not solve your problem. So again, the moratorium has been lifted and closed on this conversation. But Fitz, do you have any other thoughts on that? We can move on if not.
We're not going to get 7 slot receivers on the field with that attitude. I can tell you that.
That's
it's like
right.
the 10 safety defense. Boom. Yes.
But you know what the counter argument is. It's whether or not any of those guys that you previously mentioned for the slot can moonlight as that wide receiver.
Yeah. And I believe some of them can.
But is the answer mostly no? Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Moonlighting is the word you used. I think Tysier Denmark can play outside. Like I've seen enough to say that I think he can win at multiple positions. But we don't know yet. And so like you're asking, how do we solve a problem that we already have an answer to when we have to solve the first problem? And that's you need wide receivers on the team. Let's see. Fitz, this one's for you. This one from PSU Enjoyer 11 says, would love to hear if you guys think the 2026 class can be comparative rankings wise to 2018 and 2022. Early, it's February, but are there the earmarkers of enough 5-star talent on the big board that are realistic that they can get to that height of a top 5 class?
Yes, I've actually talked about this a couple times. I do think that we're in that cyclical moment where every 4 years is a really good high-ranking class for Penn State. And I think that they're in position to do so based a lot on the talent in the region. But even more so, you look at how those classes were built up to the high rankings is because, and you actually kind of nailed it there, the 5-star talent. And Penn State's in on some guys that are highly ranked or going to end up being highly ranked. Kevin Brown, they've already got one in the boat in Kevin Brown. Mickens is top one was 108 by the on three industry. I'm not sure that he stays up there. It's more of a running backs thing than anything.
Same thing with Quentin Martin, right?
Kind of, yeah, kind of.
In sense of position
yeah,
playing
position
effect.
value. Like he was a good player, but I think we kind of said the same about Keemon Spell when he came out and was ranked number 7 overall. It's like kind of a high watermark if you're an early running back. If the rankings is very high in the early running back, it's probably going to be a high watermark just because of how rankings happen and how running backs are kind of, I don't want to say devalued because they've maybe regained some value, but at the same time in the draft, what's that mean?
Right.
So yeah, I think it's going to end up probably battling for something like that. Now, NIL was not a factor in 2022 or 2018. So Penn State did a great job recruiting those guys. Nate, I see that little head shake there. But so that's going to play into it. And that's about landing the top level talent. Penn State ended up finishing on a high note with Andrew Olish last year, but you still missed some very quality players that I think you would have landed if that was not an issue or a prevalent part of the process, at least. Yeah, I think it can end up a top 10 class. A little shy on it going, I think 6th. 2018 was 6th. 2022 was 7th. Top 10 class would be pretty phenomenal. I think Penn State's put themselves in a position where they can get there. But it's going to take some closing. It's going to take some, I don't want to say creative bookkeeping, but it's going to take some money to secure a class like that. And with you moving Drew Aller, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, you moving all those big money guys off the board, all of a sudden you've got a little bit more to play with. And I think they can do that in the 2026 class. And I think they've shown the willingness to do it, especially with closing on a guy like Olish late in 2025. So yeah, it can happen. It's going to be a grind to get there, I think. But the region talent makes sense. And I think we probably find ourselves in a situation we found ourselves in last summer where guys go elsewhere. And then all of a sudden you're talking about them coming back around and late in the cycle. So it'll be an interesting cycle nonetheless, but the start that they've gotten is really good. And I think that they've got some guys that are pointing upward in that trajectory. You mentioned Jasir Rogers a little bit earlier in the show. Guys like that can really, really help your ranking because at the end of the day, they can be top 100 guys and really put you over the top there.
So this one here in the chat, Quite Intelligence Agency says offensive line slot receivers. Yeah, you've got Andy Cole Nicky has 6 offensive linemen to play, and some of them are lining with the slot. But back to Brad's question, Nate, I'm going to pivot this into something that is on the board that got in a little bit late, but I wanted to give you this because there's a recruiting heavy conversation here. So what's up? Okay, I'll stop my transition.
No, I know. I'm ruining everything today. Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
There were 0 teams ranked in the top 10 in this most recent cycle that didn't have at least one, and I think all of them actually had 2 5-star prospects. Can Penn State have that in 2026? Like, who are the 5 stars?
Kevin Brown's going to be one, but yeah. I mean, they've already got one. They've already got a guy that I consider a 5-star prospect, but
yeah.
Okay.
So then it's like, is it Zion Elliott? Is it Emmanuel Iheanacho? Is there another guy that's going to be a 5-star in the development curve to them?
Honestly, like if I'm Penn State in the situation Penn State is in, like their 5 stars need to be like Brown, maybe like Rogers that you get in on early. Like I have a tough time seeing them land Iheanacho, Zion Ali, because those guys are 5 stars from the jump that are going to build up a price that's over the top. Like, and I understand everybody say just pay him whatever, but it's going to be excessive. It's going to be a situation where Penn State does not typically swim in those waters, and you got to figure out a different way to go about it. And as a developmental program, you can do that with recruiting too. You just got to be on them fast. You got to be on them early, and that's tough to do. Yeah.
The speed is expensive is what I said last offseason, but just good players are expensive, really, because just the elite talent traits are expensive. Nate, this one for you, I'm pivoting again. I don't know if you can answer this question, but hard not to feel like this is the best offensive line in Penn State's time under James Franklin. So what's the last time Penn State had such a well-rounded offensive line? One that you felt like, oh my gosh, this has very few weaknesses and it's going to likely carry the team or carry the offense at least.
Whoa. Carry the offense?
I mean, is that a poor characterization of what is it? The expectation of the run game is going to lead the way?
No, look, I mean, I do. Certainly, I think that you can point to every good season that Penn State. I mean, really, most teams that have good seasons offensively have something to set the table. And yes, you need the skill position pieces and certainly the quarterback to make it go. And to realize that potential, but you also have to have an offensive line that can keep those guys upright, that can give them that opportunity. I'm terrible at the comparison game. I don't remember who was on the 2022 offensive line.
Let me set this up then. Let me set up. This is the pivot. They have a great offensive line, a lot of guys coming back. PSU Ram says they built up amazing depth, but playing time is at a premium. There is this conversation where we started with Quentin Martin of we need to get him on the field so he doesn't transfer. This downward pressure, retaining players creates a downward pressure on the roster. How much should Penn State fans be concerned that high-level recruits that they've brought into the program are looking to the portal in the spring, undercutting that depth of talent? Like how real and how concerned offensive line, but yeah, just generally like those stack positions where players are coming back. How concerned should fans be that guys exit the program and you suddenly don't have the depth of talent that you thought you did?
Is the product good on the field?
Yeah,
that's great. But you know what's better is a dominant starting force there. No, I mean it makes sense. If you're looking at a scenario like running back where you're going to have 6 scholarship, 7 scholarship, and the position is as such that it's always one that churns like that. Like you always see guys that end up in the portal. Some do stuff, some don't. Like it's whatever. But no, I mean it's part of the game these days. That's a lot. Like I mean,
the sky is falling for Brad, right? So for the podcast audience, Brad, who asked the question about Quentin Martin, says he thinks they're going to lose a tight end, 2 offensive linemen, 2 receivers, 2 DBs, maybe a linebacker and a quarterback. So a mass exodus. That I would characterize that as a mass exodus. That is I think that's an alarmed view.
In the spring? That's the argument is that they're going to lose them in the spring. Well, why didn't they go in the like, I'm just asking in this hypothetical, why didn't all those players leave after, if they knew what their fate was, why didn't they leave in January? Look, here, I'll relay something that is somewhat equivalent and somewhat not. I had a conversation recently that shed light into the idea that people, and I think that this should maybe helpful, maybe not, and maybe not everybody agrees with it, but people should stop looking at college athletics as a 4-year cycle, right? As a thing that parlays 1 year into the next. Does it happen? Yes. But effectively, you have a 1-year group, right? That like this is the team that you have this year. And then people are going to leave and people are going to come in. And the people that you keep are people that you keep because they decided, they chose, they made a conscious decision to stay, right? It's no longer just a given that this assumption that you will stay. All of this is going to happen every single year for every program across the country. And if you think about it in those terms, I think like just to me, there's a lot of wasted energy in the panic over what if, because everybody is facing what if. And the reality for Penn State, especially most recently in the coaching cycle, okay, what if Tom Allen leaves? All right, what if Penn State goes and steals Ohio State's national championship winning number 1 ranked defensive coordinator, right? What happens if, like, there's just other people, right? The talent pool is significant. And the question is your organization appealing to other people that are talented to enter it? Do you have the resources for them? Do you have all of those things? If the answer is yes, then you should feel pretty comfortable as a fan. And I think that generally speak, like, I mean, people talking about Cooper Cousins, these guys who are highly talented and as you said, potentially in a backup role. Like, okay, you are going to work as hard as you possibly can to keep those people in your program because you've already made the investment in them.
Right.
But if they don't stay, get somebody else.
Well, this is the reality of that portal door swings both ways, and the receiver position, like they just need one. Like they need to start a run of guys believing that they can come in and go to Penn State and go to the league and get yards and catches, and that's been a bit of a desert. It's been a wasteland in terms of the buzz for that position, as opposed to running back, where look at the assembly line that they've had in terms of over the James Franklin era. Fitz, did you have a point? Because I have a spin-off of this conversation for you after that.
2 points. First off, the house settlement is still very important in this because you need to cut your roster down to 105. You need to figure out what happens. And you're talking about the brutal nature of cutting not just walk-ons, but scholarship prospects as well. Like the guys that aren't going to contribute won't be here if they have to cut it down to that number. And that's really unfortunate for college football, but that's a different story. Last spring, Penn State's portal window was Keandre Lambert-Smith, which is a big deal. Malik Mega, Davon Townley, King Mack, London Montgomery, Golden Israel Achumba, and Malik McLean. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with that. So, yes, I mean, the window is certainly open, but I don't think you're looking at, okay, you've got 5 offensive linemen and the 6th offensive lineman is looking to transfer because he's not one of the 5 offensive linemen. I think you're looking further down the list, which, those positions that he looked, or that Brad listed before. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, there's always going to be movement because you're going to go through and you're going to see the writing on the wall and you're not part of this equation moving forward. But at the same time, like, I think that we've convinced ourselves that if it's not a starter, then you're going to leave, which I don't think that that's the case. And there hasn't been evidence.
There's been evidence of that necessarily.
Well, I think looking nationally, schools have been much better at retention this year, not just with their starters, but getting the guys back, whether that be financial, whether that be promises or whatever not promises, but like a vision to get them back onto the field. Like they've done much better with that. We went from trading backups in the portal to, we're just looking at guys that maybe aren't in the equation at all. So
Brad is desperate to find somebody who's going to leave. He's just throwing names out at this point. Brad, some people will leave. Like you're correct in saying some people will leave. We have seen players like King Mack leave as well. But what we're trying to say is, like, it feels like the fear here is overstated of losing all of your best depth and talent, because evidence has been that Penn State has been good at retaining those players and taking care of them and making sure that their roster that they recruit stays intact. We have to get to this last thing because I think it's very important of what Nate said of go get different guys. Fitz, in a typical recruiting class, what's a good hit percentage? Because that's how Penn State replenishes these positions and brings guys in to replace. That is their primary driver of talent acquisition. So in the class of 25, that is going to be contributing at some point, maybe 24, which will have to contribute at some point this year. What's a good hit rate for a class?
A good hit rate would be 60%. I mean, you're looking at 60%. I mean, they're not all going to pan out. That is proven several times. To me, it's like, what does that hit rate look like? You've got several guys in every class, even the class of 2024. Like, you've got guys that, I don't want to say wash out right away, but find themselves in a position where they're not really in the mix and hit the portal sometimes before the season's over. So you're looking at 50. I mean, this is a 50% game. If you're looking at 60%, you've done really well. It depends on position. You bring in 5 offensive linemen, you get 3 starters out of that. That's amazing. Like, that's awesome. So goes into position or a receiver, not just at Penn State. There's a dearth of receiver talent that can play and actually be effective at this level. There's not there's a lot of receivers out there. Not all of them can play. And I think that you've seen that not just at Penn State, but all over the place. It's probably the most populated position in the portal. Probably speaking out of where there, but it makes sense that, a lot of these guys that come in just kind of wash out. And again, it's about when does that hit rate happen? Like, Do you have stars right away? Not necessarily, but do you have guys that can, in their second and third year in the program, develop into potential starters and then eventual starters? And then I think that's what Penn State's done. So done a pretty darn good job developing, but you're never going to hit on at what you would consider to be an acceptable high rate, because that's just the game.
And I just to put a fine point on this, Penn State did fine in 2021 in terms of recruiting receivers that have contributed. 22, you had 5, sometimes 6 players. Amari Evans was the player so far that has contributed the most. He's no longer with the program. They had 1 receiver in 2023, no longer on the roster after a full season. So if you want to know about what is the critical problem right now, they had 2 years of recruiting that have essentially yielded no results that are meaningful for this roster. So the fact that that's the position that you're starting from, if you're Marcus Hagans, we have to have some perspective on this. Nate, that's the end of the show. What do you write about this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com? We covered some of what Fitz is working on, what recruiting's working on early in the show. What are you working on?
Yeah, basketball. I have some leftover stuff. Well, I wouldn't even call it leftover. I haven't used it yet. The stuff from our extravaganza talking with first-year players last week. So Tyser Denmark is cooking some good insights into him and the type of player that he can be and that he is. Maybe some stuff on those potential walk-on casualties, right? Yes or no in either direction, and kind of where Penn State is headed in that direction are all cooking. So check us out for sure.
These guys did an awesome job. I'll work on it for tomorrow. See if we can get a W in the column. Greg and I are coming up tomorrow. We've got our wrestling show. We've got the live show. Everything is full steam ahead. And of course, Cale Sanderson's comments at 1:00 today. We'll have them here for you on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Not just football and football recruiting. We're covering as much of that Penn State football ecosphere as you can handle, or we can physically do. That's all this week here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Thank you for being here. Subscribe, like, all that great stuff. We'll talk to you.